Deserts are some of the most extreme and fascinating places on Earth. Defined by their dryness rather than temperature, they receive very little rainfall and can be found on every continent, from scorching hot regions like the Sahara to icy polar deserts like Antarctica. Though they may seem empty and lifeless, deserts are home to a surprising variety of plants, animals, and even human cultures that have adapted to survive in harsh, water-scarce conditions. These vast, ever-changing landscapes reveal nature's resilience and beauty, showing how life can thrive even in the most challenging environments. Deserts are landscapes of extremes, and among their most striking features is the range of temperatures they endure. While many imagine deserts only as blistering hot, the truth is more complex. A desert is defined by its scarcity of precipitation rather than by its heat, and because of this, deserts around the world experience some of the most dramatic shifts in temperature found anywhere on Earth. From scorching days that push life to its limits to frigid nights that plunge living creatures into cold, the temperature extremes of deserts reveal the paradox of environments that are at once inhospitable and yet filled with resilience. The first image that comes to mind when speaking of desert heat is the blazing midday sun. In hot deserts such as the Sahara, the Arabian Desert, or the Sonoran Desert, daytime temperatures often rise above 40 degrees Celsius, and in some places they soar beyond 50. The lack of clouds allows sunlight to strike the ground with relentless intensity, and the dry air provides little moisture to absorb the heat. Surfaces such as sand and rock quickly heat up, radiating warmth into the surrounding air. For living things, this creates conditions of constant stress, where water evaporates rapidly and overheating becomes a daily threat. Humans and animals must adapt by being active during the cooler hours of dawn and dusk, retreating into shade or burrows during the day. But what surprises many is that these same deserts that burn under the sun can freeze once darkness falls. Without clouds or moisture in the air to trap heat, the warmth of the day quickly escapes into space. Temperatures drop dramatically, often by more than 20 degrees Celsius within a few hours. In the Sahara, nights may fall close to freezing despite daytime heat intense enough to blister skin. In high-altitude deserts such as the Gobi or the Atacama, the contrast is even more severe, with nights plunging well below zero. This duality of searing heat and piercing cold gives deserts their reputation as places of constant contradiction. Cold deserts, like the Antarctic desert or the Gobi, flip the common perception of deserts as hot places altogether. These regions remain dry, but their temperatures are far below what one might expect of a desert. Antarctica, the largest desert in the world, holds records for the coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth, -89.2 degrees Celsius. Even in summer, much of the continent remains below freezing, and the winds add further chill. The Gobi Desert, stretching across parts of northern China and Mongolia, endures winters so severe that temperatures plunge to -40, yet summers can still climb to over 40 degrees. Such extremes force life to adapt not only to dryness but also to the swing between heat and cold on a seasonal and even daily basis. The cause of these temperature extremes lies in the very nature of deserts. Moisture in the atmosphere plays a critical role in regulating temperature, acting as a blanket that moderates heat during the day and preserves warmth at night. In deserts, where humidity is minimal, this protective effect is absent. The sun's energy strikes with full force during daylight hours, and at night, nothing prevents that energy from radiating back into space. The result is an environment that exaggerates both ends of the temperature spectrum, amplifying heat and cold alike. For humans, these fluctuations pose serious challenges. Travelers who prepare only for the desert's heat may find themselves shivering at night without proper clothing or shelter. Historically, caravans crossing the Sahara or the Arabian Desert carried not only water and food, but also blankets and coverings to guard against the chill of the night. In modern times, explorers and scientists working in deserts must remain mindful of both extremes, as heat stroke and hypothermia can occur in the same place within the span of a single day. Plants and animals have evolved remarkable strategies to survive in such an environment. Many desert creatures are nocturnal, venturing out only when the air cools, conserving water and energy during the day. Others, like camels, tolerate high internal body temperatures and conserve moisture by producing concentrated urine. Small mammals and reptiles often burrow beneath the ground, where the temperature is more stable. Desert plants, from towering cacti to tiny shrubs, store water in their tissues and reduce evaporation through thick skins or minimal leaves. These adaptations are responses not only to dryness but also to the wild swings in temperature that test life's limits. Temperature extremes in deserts also leave their mark on the landscape itself. The constant heating and cooling of rocks causes them to expand during the day and contract at night, eventually cracking and breaking apart. This physical weathering contributes to the formation of the gravel plains and sand particles that characterize desert terrain. Even the iconic dunes of the Sahara are shaped in part by this cycle of temperature and wind, creating the shifting forms that move across the land over time. Beyond the desert boundaries, the extremes influence global systems. Dust storms lifted from hot deserts like the Sahara are driven by heating and cooling patterns, sending plumes of particles across oceans. These dust clouds fertilize distant ecosystems, such as the Amazon rainforest, while also affecting weather and air quality far from their source. Cold deserts, particularly Antarctica, influence global climate through their reflective ice sheets, which absorb and release heat in delicate balance with the atmosphere. Thus, the swings in temperature within deserts ripple outward, shaping environments across the earth. To speak of deserts is to speak of contrast, and nowhere is that contrast sharper than in their temperatures. The deserts of the world remind us that heat and cold are not opposites confined to separate realms but forces that coexist in a single place, alternating with startling speed. They reveal how fragile life can be in the face of such extremes, but also how resilient. The animals that burrow, the plants that endure, the people who traverse these lands, all testify to the capacity of life to adapt when the environment offers no mercy. In the desert's searing days and freezing nights, we glimpse the raw power of nature, stripped of moderation, where survival depends on respect for forces beyond control. The largest desert on Earth is not one of burning sand dunes or endless mirages, but one of ice, wind, and silence. The Antarctic Desert. It defies the popular image of a desert as a place of scorching heat, shifting sands, and camels trekking across a horizon rippling with heat waves. In truth, deserts are defined by their aridity, the lack of precipitation, rather than temperature. With that measure, Antarctica holds the title. Covering an area of around 14 million square kilometers, nearly 1.5 times the size of the United States, it dwarfs all other deserts on the planet, including the Sahara. It is a landscape of extremes, one that has always both terrified and fascinated humankind. Antarctica receives on average less than 50 millimeters of precipitation each year in its interior, most of it falling as snow, while some coastal areas receive slightly more. By comparison, the Sahara, though blistering in heat, receives at least 3 times that amount in many regions. The scarcity of moisture, combined with the coldest temperatures on Earth, makes life almost impossibly difficult. The dry, katabatic winds sweeping down from the polar plateau prevent moisture from settling and scour the surface with relentless force, sometimes reaching speeds of over 300 kilometers per hour. These conditions create a paradoxical environment where thick sheets of ice dominate, yet it remains scientifically classified as the planet's greatest desert. The Antarctic desert is not uniform. Its vast expanse is covered by ice sheets that reach up to 4 kilometers thick, containing around 60% of the world's fresh water. Beneath this frozen cap lie mountains, valleys, and even lakes sealed away under thousands of years of accumulated ice. Yet, despite this abundance of frozen water, liquid water is so rare on the surface that it might be easier to find in the Sahara during a rare rainfall. The continent's ice is locked away, immobile, and the extreme cold prevents melting except along the fringes where the ice shelves meet the Southern Ocean. Only during the brief Antarctic summer does a thin trickle of meltwater flow across exposed ground in certain places. The image of Antarctica as a lifeless expanse is not entirely accurate. While the heart of the continent is devoid of most life due to its crushing cold and dryness, its edges, where the ice meets the sea, teem with activity. Penguins huddle together to endure the brutal winters, seals rest on the ice floes, and whales breach the surrounding waters. Microscopic life exists even in the most forbidding niches, extremophile bacteria that cling to survival in the dry valleys, one of the harshest environments on the planet where precipitation is almost non-existent and the rocky ground remains bare of ice because of fierce winds. These dry valleys are often compared to Mars, and scientists use them to study what life might be like on other planets. The sheer size of the Antarctic desert has an outsized influence on the planet's climate and environment. Its ice sheets reflect sunlight back into space, playing a critical role in regulating Earth's temperature. Changes in Antarctica, such as the thinning of ice shelves or the calving of enormous icebergs, ripple outward, affecting sea levels, ocean currents, and weather systems worldwide. The Antarctic desert is not just a barren wasteland. It is a central player in Earth's interconnected systems, silently shaping the conditions in which humanity and all other forms of life exist. For centuries, this desert remained hidden from human knowledge. Ancient geographers speculated about a terra australis incognita, a great southern landmass balancing the continents of the north. But it was only in the 19th century that explorers began to venture into the frozen wilderness. Those who tried to penetrate its icy barriers faced extraordinary hardships. Ships trapped and crushed by sea ice, frostbite, starvation, and isolation. The stories of explorers like Ernest Shackleton, Robert Falcon Scott, and Roald Amundsen became legendary, illustrating both human resilience and the merciless nature of the Antarctic environment. To walk into the Antarctic interior is to step into a place that seems designed to strip away every comfort, leaving only raw endurance as a means of survival. Despite its remoteness, the Antarctic desert today is not forgotten or ignored. Scientific stations at the landscape, small enclaves of warmth and human activity, surrounded by thousands of kilometers of ice. Researchers study everything from climate patterns and glaciology to astronomy and biology, making use of the continent's isolation and clarity. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959, ensures that this desert remains free of permanent human settlement, dedicated instead to peace and science. In this way, Antarctica holds a unique status. A desert that belongs not to one nation but to all of humanity, protected from exploitation for the sake of knowledge and preservation. Yet even with this protection, Antarctica is not immune to the forces of change. Rising global temperatures and shifting weather patterns affect its ice, and the desert responds in ways that can have dramatic consequences. Ice shelves crack and break apart, glaciers accelerate their march to the sea, and regions once thought eternally frozen show signs of instability. The Antarctic desert is a silent barometer of the planet's health, its vast white expanse recording the subtle and the sudden changes in our global climate. To call Antarctica a desert is to challenge our imagination of what deserts can be. It is not a place of golden sands but of endless white horizons, a silence broken only by the cracking of ice or the howl of the wind. It is a desert not of heat but of cold, a place where survival itself is the rarest resource. Its immensity and emptiness remind us of the fragility of life and the enormity of the planet we inhabit. The Antarctic desert stands as the largest and most unforgiving desert on Earth. Yet it is also one of the most vital, a frozen heart whose beat resonates far beyond its borders. When people imagine a desert, the first picture that usually comes to mind is a vast sea of golden sand dunes, stretching endlessly beneath a scorching sun. Popular images of the Sahara, Arabian landscapes, or cinematic portrayals of deserts have cemented this idea in our minds. Yet the reality is far more surprising. Only about 20% of deserts on Earth are sandy. The rest are made up of rocky plateaus, gravel plains, mountains, dry valleys, or even ice. The familiar dunes are only a fraction of the desert story, and understanding this fact changes not just our perception of deserts, but also the way we see the diversity and resilience of these extreme environments. The definition of a desert has nothing to do with sand but with aridity. A desert is an area that receives very little precipitation, typically less than 250 millimeters of rain per year. This lack of moisture, not the presence of sand, is what defines the ecosystem. As a result, deserts can be hot or cold, sandy or rocky, barren or dotted with hardy vegetation. Antarctica, for example, is the largest desert on Earth, and it contains no sand at all, only vast sheets of ice. The Gobi Desert in Asia is another reminder that deserts can be dominated by gravel, rocks, and windswept plains rather than dunes. These landscapes, stark and often austere, are just as much deserts as the iconic sandy expanses of the Sahara. The fact that sandy deserts are a minority reflects the geological forces that shape them. Sand is created through the weathering and erosion of rock, broken down into fine particles over thousands or millions of years. For sand dunes to form, these particles must be carried and deposited by wind, and conditions must allow them to accumulate rather than being locked in place by vegetation or washed away by rain. In many deserts, however, the dominant features are hard rock or gravel plains, where winds blow away smaller particles, leaving behind heavier stones that armor the surface. These regs, as they are known in the Sahara, form vast stretches of flat, stony land that are far more common than dunes. Indeed, even in the Sahara Desert, the quintessential image of endless sand, dunes cover only about a quarter of the total area. The majority of its landscape consists of rocky plateaus, gravelly plains, dry valleys, and rugged mountains. These terrains, though less romanticized in art and film, are more representative of what deserts are really like. The same is true of the deserts of Australia, where large portions are covered in gibber plains, fields of closely packed stones that glisten under the sun, creating a shimmering, harsh beauty. Understanding that most deserts are not sandy also helps explain why they support diverse forms of life. Gravel plains and rocky areas often retain pockets of soil where hardy plants can take root, creating food and shelter for animals. Mountains within deserts can trap a little more rainfall and provide microhabitats that sustain surprising biodiversity. Even dry valleys may harbor underground aquifers or occasional flash floods that briefly transform the landscape. Sand, in contrast, is less stable and often shifts with the wind, making it harder for life to anchor itself. While some species are superbly adapted to dune environments, such as sand vipers or specialized beetles, many others thrive in the rocky or gravelly regions that dominate desert ecosystems. The misconception that deserts are mostly sand has shaped the way people think about them, often leading to the idea that they are lifeless and monotonous. But deserts are among the most varied landscapes on the planet. Their surfaces can be sharp with jagged rock, paved with endless gravel, or etched with salt flats where water once evaporated. They can be colored red, black, white, or brown depending on the minerals in the soil. They may host towering cliffs, canyons, or mesas carved by wind and time. Sand is only one piece of this puzzle, and by focusing only on dunes, we miss the greater richness of desert forms. The persistence of sandy desert imagery is not without reason. Dunes capture the imagination because they move and reshape themselves in ways that seem almost alive. Wind carves their crests and pushes them slowly across the land, forming curves and patterns that are hypnotic in their beauty. They appear in literature, art, and film as symbols of emptiness, danger, or endurance. Yet the dominance of this imagery has obscured the fact that dunes are the minority in the real desert world. To appreciate deserts fully is to look beyond the sand and see the rocks, the gravel, and the windswept plains that define most of their expanses. For people who live in desert regions, the difference is not merely aesthetic but practical. Navigating dunes is difficult, but gravel plains or rocky plateaus present other challenges, from harsh surfaces to scarcity of vegetation. In some places, such as the Namib Desert, sand dunes coexist with gravel plains and coastal fog, creating a complex environment that sustains unique species. In others, like the Atacama in South America, salt flats stretch for miles, shaped by ancient lakes that dried up in the arid climate. Each type of desert landscape requires different strategies for survival, whether for humans, animals, or plants. Recognizing that only 20% of deserts are sandy broadens our understanding of these ecosystems. It reminds us that deserts are not uniform wastelands but dynamic environments with varied geology and ecology. They are shaped by millions of years of wind, water, and tectonic forces, and they contain within them some of the most extreme yet vibrant examples of life on Earth. By looking past the stereotype of endless dunes, we can appreciate deserts for what they truly are: diverse, resilient, and astonishing landscapes where survival is an art honed by both nature and time. Cacti are among the most iconic symbols of desert survival, standing tall and resilient in landscapes where life seems nearly impossible. Their presence in harsh, arid environments often raises the question of how they endure the extreme conditions that drive most other plants to wither and die. The answer lies in a collection of remarkable adaptations, biological tricks perfected over millions of years, that allow cacti to conserve water, endure scorching heat, and survive long periods without rainfall. These survival strategies make them some of the most efficient and resilient plants on Earth, perfectly suited to the unforgiving ecosystems they inhabit. The most obvious feature of cacti is their thick, fleshy stems. Unlike the leaves of typical plants, cactus stems serve as reservoirs, storing vast amounts of water during the rare occasions when rain falls. Their tissues act like sponges, swelling when water is available and slowly shrinking as the stored supply is consumed during dry spells. Some species can store hundreds of liters within their bodies, enough to sustain them for months or even years of drought. This water storage capacity is crucial in deserts, where rain may fall only a few times a year and sometimes not at all. But storing water is only part of the trick. Cacti must also protect that precious resource from loss. Their surfaces are covered with a thick, waxy cuticle that acts as a barrier against evaporation. Unlike plants with broad leaves that release moisture through countless pores, cacti have drastically reduced their leaves into spines, minimizing the surface area from which water can escape. These spines, though sharp and defensive, serve more than one purpose. They shade the cactus body, reducing the temperature of the stem, and they break up air currents, slowing the movement of hot, dry winds across the surface. In this way, spines are both armor and air conditioning, making them as vital to survival as the water stored inside. The spines also serve as deterrents against animals. In a desert where water is scarce, the succulent interior of a cactus is a tempting prize for thirsty creatures. By covering themselves in a formidable array of spines, cacti discourage most would-be predators from tearing them open. Some species, like the cholla, take defense a step further with spines that detach easily and cling to anything that brushes against them, ensuring that even the attempt to approach becomes painful. These adaptations preserve the plant's survival against not just the climate but also the appetites of animals that share its environment. Cacti also employ a unique form of photosynthesis known as CAM, or crassulation acid metabolism, which allows them to use water far more efficiently than most plants. Instead of opening their pores or stomata during the day when temperatures are high and water loss would be greatest, cacti open them at night, when the air is cooler and more humid. They take in carbon dioxide during these nighttime hours and store it until daylight, when they use the stored gas for photosynthesis. This reverse schedule drastically reduces water loss, giving cacti a huge advantage in the desert. It is a biochemical trick that perfectly matches the rhythms of an unforgiving environment. Even their shapes are part of their survival strategy. Many cacti are cylindrical or spherical, forms that minimize surface area relative to their volume, further reducing water loss. Their pleated surfaces allow them to expand like an accordion when water is available and contract as it is used up, without damaging their tissues. Some grow low to the ground to escape the full force of the sun and wind, while others grow tall to access more light and space. In every case, the structure of the cactus reflects a design that balances efficiency, conservation, and endurance. The roots of cacti are another hidden adaptation. They are shallow and spread wide, allowing the plant to quickly absorb any rainfall before it evaporates into the dry desert air. A brief shower may not penetrate deep into the ground, but it provides enough moisture for the cactus to capture at once. Some species can even grow temporary rootlets to exploit sudden rain, and then let them wither when the soil dries again, conserving energy. This opportunistic approach ensures that not a single drop of water is wasted. Cacti are not merely survivors. They are essential players in desert ecosystems. Their flowers, which bloom dramatically and often briefly, attract pollinators such as bats, moths, and bees, ensuring reproduction even in harsh climates. Their fruits provide food and water for animals, from birds to humans, and their structures offer shade and shelter in otherwise exposed landscapes. In this way, cacti contribute to the delicate balance of life in the desert, sustaining not only themselves but also the creatures around them. The survival tricks of cacti have also made them significant to human cultures. Indigenous peoples of the Americas, where cacti are native, have long relied on them for food, medicine, and water. Species like the prickly pear produce edible fruits and pads, while others provided emergency hydration in times of need. Some cacti hold ceremonial and symbolic importance, representing endurance, protection, and adaptation. Even in modern times, their forms inspire admiration, their resilience a metaphor for persistence against hardship. To stand before a cactus in the desert is to see a plant that embodies ingenuity. Every spine, every fold, every hidden root is the result of countless generations adapting to scarcity and extremes. While other plants may thrive in abundance, cacti thrive in absence, turning deprivation into a way of life. Their survival tricks reveal the extraordinary creativity of evolution, showing how life bends and reshapes itself to meet the most daunting challenges. In their stillness, they are not fragile but powerful, guardians of endurance in the harshest corners of the earth. The Sahara Desert, already the largest hot desert in the world, is not a fixed or unchanging landscape. It grows, inching outward over time, expanding its reach into areas that once supported more vegetation and human life. When people imagine the Sahara, they often picture an endless ocean of dunes stretching across North Africa. But the desert is far more varied, containing rocky plateaus, gravel plains, dry valleys, and mountains. It covers more than 9 million square kilometers, comparable in size to the entire United States. And yet it is not content to remain still. The Sahara is expanding, driven by shifts in climate, human activity, and natural cycles. And this expansion has profound consequences for both people and the environment. The growth of the Sahara is not sudden or dramatic in the way a storm might roll across the sky, but it is steady and measurable. Research indicates that since the early 20th century, the desert has expanded by about 10%, pushing deeper into the Sahel, the transitional zone of semi-arid grassland that separates the desert from the more fertile regions to the south. This means that areas once able to sustain crops, herds, and communities are gradually turning into barren land, incapable of supporting the lives that depend on them. The movement of the desert is not uniform. It grows more in some directions than in others, but the trend is undeniable. One of the main factors contributing to the Sahara's expansion is climate variability. Rainfall patterns across North Africa are strongly influenced by changes in ocean temperatures, particularly those of the Atlantic. When the Atlantic warms or cools in certain cycles, the distribution of monsoons shifts, often bringing drought to the Sahel. These prolonged droughts, combined with rising global temperatures, reduce the already limited rainfall, leaving soils dry and unable to support vegetation. Without plants to stabilize the soil and retain moisture, the land becomes increasingly vulnerable to erosion and encroachment by the desert. Yet nature is not the only force at work. Human activities intensify the desert's advance. Overgrazing by livestock, deforestation for firewood, and unsustainable farming practices strip the land of its protective cover, leaving it exposed to wind and sun. As the population in Sahelian countries grows, pressure on the land increases, and practices that might once have been sustainable no longer are. Farmers plow deeper into marginal lands, cutting down trees to expand fields, while herders drive animals across fragile ecosystems. This accelerates soil degradation and creates a feedback loop. The more degraded the land becomes, the less it can produce, forcing communities to exploit it further in desperation, hastening its decline. The expansion of the Sahara has very real human consequences. Millions of people in the Sahel rely on subsistence agriculture and pastoralism to survive. When the desert grows, their resources shrink. Water becomes scarcer, crops fail more often, and livestock struggle to find grazing land. Communities that once thrived are forced into migration, moving southward or into already crowded cities in search of survival. This creates social tensions, as scarce resources must be shared among growing populations. In some cases, conflict arises between farmers and herders, or between different ethnic groups, as they compete for dwindling land and water. Despite the grim picture, the growth of the Sahara is not entirely beyond human influence. There are efforts underway to resist and even reverse desertification. The most ambitious of these is the Great Green Wall Project, a Pan-African initiative that envisions a vast belt of trees, vegetation, and sustainable land management practices stretching across the entire continent from Senegal in the west to Djibouti in the east. The goal is to create a living barrier that will halt the advance of the desert, restore degraded lands, and provide food and jobs for local communities. While progress has been uneven and challenges immense, the project symbolizes a recognition that human effort can help counter the relentless march of the desert. The Sahara's expansion also invites reflection on the relationship between humans and the environment. The desert has always shifted over millennia, expanding and contracting in response to natural climate changes. Thousands of years ago, during the so-called Green Sahara period, much of what is now desert was lush with lakes, rivers, and grasslands, home to animals like giraffes and hippos and to human civilizations that left behind rock art and artifacts. This reminds us that the Sahara is not static, but part of a dynamic system that changes with time. What is different now is the speed of its growth and the vulnerability of the populations living at its edge, who cannot adapt as quickly as ancient ecosystems once did. The expansion of the Sahara is a stark reminder of how intertwined climate and human activity have become. Rising global temperatures, tied to greenhouse gas emissions, interact with local land use practices to shape the fate of one of the most iconic landscapes on Earth. It is not just a regional issue. The desert's growth contributes to dust storms that travel across the Atlantic, carrying nutrients to the Amazon rainforest, but also affecting air quality in the Americas and Europe. The Sahara, vast and seemingly remote, has a reach that extends across the planet. To say that the Sahara grows is to acknowledge both the power of nature and the impact of humanity. It is a story of shifting boundaries, where the line between fertile land and barren desert is constantly being redrawn. It is a story of struggle, as communities on the edge adapt to harsher conditions with resilience and ingenuity. And it is a warning, too, that deserts are not confined places, but living systems that respond to the pressures we place on the earth. The Sahara is growing, not in silence but in the lives it disrupts, the migrations it sparks, and the global signals it sends. In its expansion, we see both the fragility of human existence in the face of nature's forces and the responsibility we bear to confront the challenges of a changing world. Across the world's great deserts, where the land seems frozen in stillness beneath a blazing sky, the sands are quietly on the move. What looks like a static landscape of towering dunes and rippling ridges is, in fact, always changing. Grains of sand, lifted and carried by the wind, travel step by step across the desert floor, and over time, entire dunes migrate. Some shift only a few meters in a year, while others advance dozens. It is a slow but relentless movement, a reminder that even in the most seemingly unchanging environments, the forces of nature are at work, reshaping the land grain by grain. The migration of sand dunes begins with the wind, the great sculptor of desert landscapes. When it blows strongly enough, it lifts the smallest sand grains into the air and pushes larger ones along the ground in a series of tiny hops. This process, known as saltation, is repeated countless times, moving sand across vast distances. As the grains accumulate, They form mounds that grow and evolve into dunes. But they are never fixed. The same wind that builds them also pushes them forward, causing them to creep slowly across the landscape like waves across the sea. The shape and speed of a dune's movement depend on many factors: the strength and consistency of the wind, the size of the sand grains, the presence of vegetation, and the slope of the land. Crescent-shaped barcon dunes, common in places like the Sahara and the Gobi, are among the most mobile. They form in areas with limited sand supply and steady winds from one direction, and they can migrate several meters or even tens of meters per year. Their horns point downwind, and as sand is blown over the crest and falls on the leeward side, the entire dune shifts forward, maintaining its graceful curve as it goes. Other types of dunes, such as star dunes with multiple arms, tend to move more slowly because they form where winds blow from different directions. But even these seemingly stationary giants are not truly still. Over decades or centuries, they, too, inch their way across the desert floor, reshaped by shifting winds. In some cases, satellite imagery has revealed dunes migrating steadily year after year, their progress visible only when measured against distant landmarks. The scale of dune movement is not always gentle or gradual. In certain conditions, migration can be dramatic and disruptive. Entire dune fields, pushed by strong and persistent winds, have been known to engulf roads, farms, and even towns. In China's Tunggar Desert, dunes have steadily advanced on human settlements, forcing communities to build barriers and plant vegetation to slow their approach. In parts of Mauritania and Niger, shifting dunes have buried ancient caravan routes that once guided traders across the Sahara. Such events are a reminder that dunes, though made of tiny, seemingly insignificant grains, possess immense collective power when set in motion. Beneath the drama of their migration lies a fascinating natural rhythm. Dunes are constantly eroding on their windward sides and building up on their sheltered sides, a process that allows them to maintain their shape even as they move. The sand at the base of a dune may remain in place, compacted and unmoving, while the sand near the surface is lifted and pushed forward. In this way, dunes behave much like living organisms, growing, shifting, and adapting to their environment over time. Their movement is slow enough to escape the notice of the casual observer, but fast enough to reshape entire landscapes over decades or centuries. This steady migration has far-reaching ecological and geological effects. As dunes move, they can cover some areas with sand while exposing others, creating a mosaic of habitats that influences plant and animal life. In some deserts, such as the Namib, migrating dunes reveal ancient riverbeds or fossilized landscapes that tell the story of Earth's past climates. In others, the movement of sand replenishes certain ecosystems, forming new dunes that become home to specialized plants and insects adapted to shifting sands. Even human history bears the mark of dune migration. Archaeologists have discovered buried villages, roads, and monuments in regions where the desert's advancing sands slowly swallowed traces of earlier civilizations. Scientists study dune movement not only to understand desert dynamics, but also to learn about planetary processes beyond Earth. On Mars and even on Saturn's moon Titan, dunes formed by wind and sediment behave in strikingly similar ways, migrating across alien landscapes just as they do on Earth. By studying dune migration in our own deserts, researchers gain insights into wind patterns, surface conditions, and climate processes on distant worlds. Humans, too, have learned to live with and sometimes fight against the slow march of the dunes. In some regions, planting grasses and shrubs has proven effective at anchoring sand and reducing dune movement. In others, Fences and barriers have been built to redirect the wind or trap moving sand. Yet the forces that move dunes are vast and enduring, and attempts to stop them entirely often fail. Over time, the sands find new paths, slipping around obstacles or rising above them, continuing their journey across the land. There is a quiet poetry to this constant motion. Sand dunes are monuments not of permanence but of change. They remind us that landscapes we think of as fixed are, in truth, alive and evolving, shaped by forces that operate on scales too vast for us to easily perceive. A dune that seems eternal to one generation may have shifted significantly by the next, its crest rising in a new place, its slopes carved by new winds. To walk among dunes is to walk through a landscape in motion. The grains beneath one's feet may have been carried from far away, lifted and dropped countless times by winds that have blown for centuries. The dune itself is both ancient and new, a form shaped by time but never fixed. And though we may think of deserts as places of stillness, their sands are always on the move, creeping steadily forward, reshaping the world in silence. The migration of dunes, measured in meters per year, is a subtle but powerful force. It is a testament to the patient work of wind and time, to the way even the smallest particles can transform entire landscapes when they move together. When people imagine the road to Mars, they often picture gleaming rockets, advanced spacesuits, and laboratories filled with cutting-edge technology. Yet one of the most valuable training grounds for astronauts preparing to explore the Red Planet is not far beyond Earth's atmosphere but here, on our own planet, in some of its most desolate landscapes. Earth's deserts, with their harsh climates, barren expanses, and unforgiving conditions, serve as natural laboratories where NASA and other space agencies rehearse the challenges of living and working on Mars. These seemingly empty regions, shaped by millennia of wind and sun, offer an environment that, while not identical to Mars, is close enough to test human endurance, equipment reliability, and mission strategies before humanity ventures into deep space. Mars is a cold, dry world with a thin atmosphere, extreme temperature fluctuations, and a surface carved by ancient winds and water. Deserts on Earth, though far more hospitable by comparison, share many of these traits. They are remote and isolated, with limited water, sparse vegetation, and vast stretches of rocky or sandy terrain that can resemble the Martian surface. It is precisely this similarity that has drawn scientists and astronauts to places like the Mojave Desert in California, the deserts of Utah, and the volcanic plains of Hawaii and Chile. In these locations, researchers simulate Mars missions as realistically as possible, transforming the hostile emptiness into a proving ground for the future of space exploration. One of NASA's most prominent Mars analog sites is the Mars Desert Research Station, MDRS, in Utah, operated by the Mars Society. Tucked away in a remote region of the San Rafael Swell, this small habitat resembles a Martian base, complete with airlocks, laboratories, and living quarters. Here, teams of scientists, engineers, and astronaut candidates spend weeks at a time living as if they were on Mars. They don spacesuits to leave the habitat, conduct geological surveys, test rovers, and practice collecting rock samples. Activities that future explorers will perform millions of kilometers from Earth. Communication with the outside world is delayed to mimic the time lag between Mars and Earth, forcing crews to make decisions independently, just as they will have to do on the Red Planet. The isolation of such missions is not merely a physical challenge but a psychological one. Living in confined quarters for extended periods, cut off from family and familiar comforts, mirrors the emotional strain of a real Mars expedition. Researchers monitor how crews cope with stress, fatigue, and interpersonal dynamics, using these missions to refine strategies for maintaining mental health during long-duration space travel. Every small detail, from meal preparation to daily routines, is part of the larger experiment to understand how humans can survive and thrive in a world that offers no second chances. Other desert environments offer unique advantages for Mars simulation. In Hawaii, on the slopes of the Mauna Loa volcano, NASA and its partners have conducted missions in the HIC's Hawaii Space Exploration Analog and Simulation Habitat. The volcanic terrain, with its red, rocky surface and lack of vegetation, closely resembles Martian landscapes. Participants in HIC's missions live in a geodesic dome for months, simulating the isolation and self-sufficiency required for interplanetary missions. They conduct fieldwork in simulated spacesuits, test food systems, and practice emergency procedures, all while adhering to strict protocols designed to mimic the conditions of an actual Mars base. Meanwhile, in Chile's Atacama Desert, one of the driest places on Earth, NASA scientists study microbial life in extreme conditions. The Atacama's aridity and mineral-rich soil make it one of the closest Earth analogs to Mars. By searching for hardy microorganisms that survive in its parched soil, researchers gain insight into how life might persist on Mars and what kinds of biosignatures robotic missions like Perseverance should look for. The Atacama also allows engineers to test instruments and rovers under conditions that challenge both technology and human operators, ensuring that they will function reliably in the unforgiving Martian environment. Even the Mojave Desert, with its scorching days and frigid nights, has become a valuable test site. NASA has used it to trial new spacesuits, life support systems, and vehicles, pushing technology to its limits in an environment where mistakes have real consequences. The desert's isolation also provides a place to practice emergency scenarios, how to respond to equipment failure, medical issues, or unexpected environmental hazards when help is days or weeks away. These rehearsals on Earth prepare astronauts for the reality that, on Mars, they will have to solve problems quickly and independently, with no chance of immediate rescue. Desert simulations are not perfect. Earth's atmosphere, gravity, and biological richness differ vastly from Mars, but they are indispensable stepping stones. They allow NASA to refine mission plans, train astronauts in realistic conditions, and identify problems long before they arise on another planet. Every experiment, every simulated mission, is a lesson in adaptation and resilience. The experience gained in Earth's deserts informs the design of habitats, tools, and procedures, reducing risks and increasing the chances of success when humanity finally takes its first steps on Martian soil. There is also a symbolic resonance in this approach. Deserts have long been places of trial and transformation for humankind, testing endurance and ingenuity. Now, as humanity reaches beyond its home world, they continue that role, shaping the explorers who will one day cross the void to another planet. The windswept dunes and silent volcanic plains of Earth's deserts are, in a sense, rehearsals for the landscapes that await us on Mars. When astronauts finally gaze across the red horizon of the Martian surface, much of what they know about navigating barren terrain, conserving resources, and working together in isolation will have been learned not in distant space but in the deserts of Earth. These harsh, beautiful places remind us that exploration begins here, with our feet on the ground, long before it reaches for the stars. Life in the desert is a constant negotiation with extremes, a relentless struggle to endure under a sun that burns without mercy and skies that rarely weep. Yet even in such unforgiving conditions, nature finds astonishing ways to persist. Among the most remarkable of these are desert plants that appear lifeless for years, shriveled and brittle under the scorching sun, only to spring back to life within hours of a rare rainfall. Their transformation seems almost magical, as if the desert itself has awakened from a deep sleep. But behind this miracle lies a story of extraordinary adaptation, resilience, and the quiet genius of evolution. One of the most famous of these plants is the resurrection plant, known in different deserts by different names. In the Chihuahuan Desert of North America, Selaginella lepidophylla curls into a tight, brown ball during drought. It can remain in this state not just for months but for years, blown about by the wind like a tumbleweed, seemingly dead. Yet the moment rain falls and moisture touches its roots, it unfurls, turning green and vibrant within hours. Its leaves, once crisp and brittle, soften and open to the sky, ready to photosynthesize and grow. When the water evaporates and the soil dries again, the plant slowly curls back into dormancy, repeating this cycle as many times as necessary to survive in its arid home. This ability is known as desiccation tolerance, and it is one of nature's most extraordinary survival strategies. Most plants cannot survive the loss of more than a small percentage of their water. Their cells collapse, their tissues die, and no rain can bring them back. Desert resurrection plants, however, are different. They have evolved special proteins and sugars that protect their cells during dehydration. As they dry out, their tissues do not shatter but instead enter a state of suspended animation. Their cellular structures fold and stabilize, their metabolic processes slow almost to a halt, and their DNA is shielded from damage. In this state, time nearly stops for them, and they can wait patiently for water to return, no matter how long it takes. When rain finally arrives, sometimes after years of relentless drought, the response is astonishingly swift. The dry tissues absorb water rapidly, swelling and softening. Metabolic processes restart, enzymes awaken, and photosynthesis resumes. In a matter of hours, a plant that looked like a ball of dead twigs becomes lush and alive, producing food, growing, and even preparing to reproduce. Some desert plants take advantage of this brief window of abundance to flower and set seed quickly, ensuring the next generation before the water disappears again. Others simply rebuild their energy reserves, knowing that the next dry season could be just around the corner. This remarkable adaptation is not limited to a single species or region. Across the world's deserts, plants from entirely different evolutionary lineages have developed similar strategies. In Africa's Namib Desert, the resurrection bush Myrothamnus flabellifolia behaves much like Selaginella, its branches drying and curling during drought and reviving with the first rainfall. In Australia's arid interior, certain species of moss and lichen can lie dormant for decades, springing back to life when moisture returns. These plants are living proof of nature's ingenuity, showing that even the harshest environments can be home to life if it is adaptable enough. The survival of these plants has broader ecological consequences as well. When they revive after rain, they become part of a sudden burst of life that sweeps across the desert. Their green leaves capture sunlight and produce food, providing nourishment for insects and small animals. Their flowers offer nectar and pollen, attracting pollinators that help sustain the wider ecosystem. Even their brief presence stabilizes the soil and reduces erosion, creating microhabitats where other, less hardy plants might take root. In this way, resurrection plants serve as anchors of resilience in an environment defined by scarcity. For people, too, these plants have long been a source of fascination and respect. Indigenous communities have known of their powers for centuries, using them in traditional medicine or as symbols of renewal and endurance. In some cultures, They are carried as charms or used in rituals, embodying the hope of rebirth after hardship. In recent years, scientists have turned their attention to them as well, studying their unique proteins and biochemical pathways in hopes of applying this knowledge to agriculture. If crops could be engineered to mimic the desiccation tolerance of resurrection plants, they might better withstand drought and climate change, offering a solution to one of humanity's most pressing challenges. There is something profoundly poetic about these plants and their silent resilience. In the relentless dryness of the desert, where death seems to reign, they show that life can persist even in near lifelessness. Their ability to dry out without dying, to wait patiently for years and then spring back to life in hours, speaks to a deep truth about nature: that survival is not always about constant activity or growth. Sometimes it is about endurance, about knowing when to pause and when to awaken. Watching a resurrection plant come back to life is a humbling experience. It is a reminder that what appears dead is not always gone, and that life has ways of enduring that defy our expectations. In a world where water is scarce and survival is never guaranteed, these plants embody patience and persistence. They shrink and hide when the world becomes too harsh, conserving their strength until the time is right. And then, when the rains return, they rise again, green, alive, and full of possibility. The desert may seem a place of death and emptiness, but these plants tell another story. They show that life there is not just possible but profoundly resilient, capable of bending without breaking, of waiting without withering away. And in their quiet, miraculous revival after the rain, they remind us of nature's enduring power to adapt, survive, and bloom again, no matter how harsh the world may become. Beneath the scorching sands and sun-baked stones of many deserts, where the surface appears utterly dry and lifeless, hidden rivers sometimes flow silently in the darkness. These underground streams are invisible to the casual eye, yet they are among the most remarkable secrets of arid landscapes. In places where rain is scarce and surface water vanishes quickly under the relentless sun, groundwater moving through ancient channels beneath the earth can sustain life, shape ecosystems, and even determine where humans and animals can survive. The existence of these hidden rivers is a powerful reminder that deserts, for all their apparent emptiness, often conceal far more than they reveal. Deserts are defined by their lack of surface water. Rainfall is rare and unpredictable, and any streams that do form on the surface often disappear in hours, swallowed by thirsty soil or evaporated into the hot, dry air. Yet water is persistent, and over thousands or even millions of years, it finds ways to move and endure. Rain and melting snow that fall on distant mountains seep into the ground, percolating slowly through layers of rock and sand. Some of this water travels great distances underground, following the pull of gravity until it emerges again far from its source. What results is a network of subterranean rivers and aquifers, hidden veins of life that flow quietly beneath the desert's surface. One of the most striking examples of this phenomenon lies beneath the Sahara Desert. Today it is the largest hot desert on Earth, a vast expanse of dunes and barren plains that seems incapable of supporting rivers. But hidden below its sands are immense reserves of groundwater stored in ancient aquifers, remnants of a time when the Sahara was green and dotted with lakes and rivers. These underground rivers, some of them flowing slowly through porous rock, stretch beneath several countries, including Libya, Egypt, and Chad. Libya's great man-made river project, for instance, taps into this subterranean water to supply cities and farms, transporting billions of liters each day through a vast network of pipes. Though the project is controversial and the water is a finite resource, It illustrates the scale and significance of these hidden rivers. In the deserts of North America, too, underground water plays a crucial role. Beneath the Sonoran and Mojave deserts, groundwater slowly flows through aquifers carved by ancient rivers. This hidden water emerges at desert springs and oases, where it supports an astonishing array of life. In places like the Coachella Valley of California or the Springs of Arizona, palm groves and wetlands flourish in the midst of aridity, fed by water that fell as rain hundreds or even thousands of years ago. These small green pockets are critical refuges for birds, insects, mammals, and plants, and they have long been vital stopping points for humans as well. Indigenous peoples, travelers, and settlers have relied on such water sources for centuries, and many towns in arid regions grew up around reliable springs linked to these subterranean flows. Even in the heart of Australia's outback, where the land seems too harsh to harbor water, ancient underground rivers sustain life. The Great Artesian Basin, one of the largest groundwater systems in the world, lies beneath much of eastern and central Australia. Water that fell as rain on the continent's highlands millions of years ago still moves slowly through this vast network of porous sandstone. In some places, it surfaces naturally in springs, creating unexpected oases where birds gather and Aboriginal communities have lived for tens of thousands of years. In other areas, wells tap into the hidden water, providing vital resources for remote towns and cattle stations. Without these underground rivers, large parts of the Australian interior would be nearly uninhabitable. The presence of hidden rivers beneath deserts is not just a geological curiosity. It is a force that shapes ecosystems and human history alike. Animals have evolved to find and rely on water that surfaces at springs, often traveling great distances guided by instinct and memory. Plants take root near seeps and oases, forming miniature habitats that stand in stark contrast to the surrounding desert. For humans, these hidden water sources have been nothing less than lifelines. Ancient trade routes often followed the locations of underground-fed springs, and entire civilizations arose in regions where hidden water could be accessed and used. The famous desert city of Petra in Jordan, carved into rose-colored cliffs, relied on sophisticated water systems that captured and channeled both surface runoff and subterranean flows. Yet these underground rivers are fragile. They are often slow to recharge, fed by rainfall that may have fallen millennia ago. Overuse, pollution, and climate change threaten many of them. Drawing too much water too quickly can lower water tables, dry up springs, and destabilize delicate desert ecosystems. In some places, the removal of groundwater for agriculture and cities has already caused springs to vanish, leaving behind only dry hollows where life once thrived. Protecting these hidden rivers requires understanding their origins, flow patterns, and limits, a challenge that scientists and policymakers are still grappling with in many parts of the world. The idea of rivers flowing unseen beneath deserts adds a layer of mystery to these landscapes. What appears empty and dead on the surface often hides complexity and abundance below. These hidden waters remind us that deserts are not simply wastelands but dynamic environments shaped by forces both visible and invisible. They show how water, even when scarce, can carve paths through stone, sustain ecosystems in unlikely places, and make human life possible where it otherwise would not exist. To walk across the parched surface of a desert is to tread above an unseen world, a world where water, ancient and enduring, moves silently through darkness, shaping life and landscape alike. It is a humbling thought that beneath the silence of the dunes and the glare of the sun, rivers continue their patient journey, unseen but essential. Their presence reveals that even in the harshest environments, nature finds ways to endure, to adapt, and to sustain the possibility of life. In deserts, where the sun beats down with relentless intensity and water is always scarce, survival demands ingenuity. Among the most striking strategies of life in these arid environments is the rhythm of activity itself. Up to 70% of desert animals are nocturnal, choosing to rest during the day and emerge under cover of darkness. This timing is not mere coincidence but a carefully honed survival mechanism, a response to the extremes of temperature and scarcity of moisture that define desert life. By avoiding the hottest hours, these creatures conserve water, regulate their body temperatures more efficiently, and navigate the desert in ways that increase their chances of survival. The desert sun poses the greatest threat to life. During the day, surface temperatures can soar to levels that are fatal for most animals. The heat is not only unbearable but also accelerates dehydration. Water evaporates rapidly, leaving creatures vulnerable to exhaustion and death. For animals without the ability to sweat or store large amounts of water, exposure can be catastrophic. In such a climate, being active at night is not just preferable, it is essential. When the sun sets, the desert cools, often dramatically. This drop in temperature creates conditions where activity is possible without the constant risk of overheating. It is under the stars and the moon that the desert truly comes alive. For many desert species, night is the time to hunt, feed, and move. Owls swoop silently through the cool air in search of small rodents, whose own nocturnal habits bring them out of their burrows to forage. Foxes and jackals roam the sands under cover of darkness, using the cooler air to travel farther in search of food. Reptiles such as geckos and certain snakes emerge to hunt insects and small prey, their bodies better suited to the moderate temperatures of night. Even insects, from beetles to moths, shift their activity into the hours when the sun no longer scorches the land. The web of nocturnal activity forms a complex and balanced ecosystem, all tied to the avoidance of the sun. One of the most remarkable adaptations linked to nocturnality is burrowing. Many desert animals spend their days in underground shelters where temperatures are far lower and humidity slightly higher than on the surface. Rodents like kangaroo rats or gerbils retreat to their tunnels at sunrise, conserving energy and moisture. Lizards and snakes coil in shaded crevices or beneath the sand. Even larger animals, such as desert tortoises, dig burrows to protect themselves from the heat. By hiding during the day and emerging at night, these creatures maintain a cycle that maximizes their chances of survival in an environment where the margin for error is razor thin. Nocturnality is not only about avoiding heat, it is also about conserving water. Animals that are active at night lose less moisture through respiration and evaporation because the air is cooler and often carries slightly higher humidity. Many desert animals have further adapted by producing concentrated urine or even metabolizing water directly from the food they eat. A kangaroo rat, for instance, can survive its entire life without drinking liquid water, relying instead on seeds that provide both energy and metabolic moisture. Its nocturnal lifestyle ensures that every drop is preserved. The night also brings safety. For smaller animals, darkness provides a degree of protection from predators that hunt by sight. Moving under cover of darkness allows them to forage without as much risk of being spotted. Yet predators themselves are often just as active, having developed heightened senses to function in low light. Many nocturnal desert creatures possess large eyes to capture as much light as possible, or sensitive whiskers and hearing that guide them in the dark. Bats navigate using echolocation, filling the night with calls beyond human hearing as they swoop after insects. These specialized traits underscore how life in the desert is inseparable from the rhythm of night. Cultural perceptions often portray deserts as empty and lifeless, but this impression comes from observing them in daylight, when much of their life is hidden. In truth, deserts hum with activity once the sun sets. A quiet plain that seems barren in the heat of day transforms into a landscape of motion and sound in the coolness of night. The majority of its inhabitants are active then, shaping an ecosystem that is invisible to the casual observer. To walk through the desert at night is to witness a world transformed. The call of an owl, the scurry of rodents, the hiss of a snake, the rustle of beetles in the sand. The dominance of nocturnality in desert life also demonstrates the flexibility and resilience of nature. In an environment where survival might seem impossible, animals have not only endured but flourished by aligning their behavior with the cycle of temperature and darkness. Their lives show that survival in the desert is less about brute strength and more about timing, strategy, and adaptation. By shifting their activity to the hours when the harshness of the sun is absent, they carve out a way of life that turns a hostile environment into a livable one. The fact that as much as 70% of desert animals are nocturnal underscores a profound truth about deserts. They are not dead lands but places of rhythm and adaptation. The day belongs to the sun, the heat, and the silence, but the night belongs to life. Life that has learned to emerge when the dangers are lowest and the opportunities greatest. In this cycle, deserts reveal their hidden richness, reminding us that survival is often a matter of patience, of waiting for the right moment to act. The creatures of the desert know this intimately, and in their nocturnal patterns, they tell the story of resilience in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Stretching along the Pacific coast of South America, wedged between the towering Andes Mountains and the cold currents of the Pacific Ocean, lies a land so dry and stark it seems almost alien. The Atacama Desert of northern Chile is often described as the driest non-polar desert on Earth, a place where rain is so rare that entire generations have lived and died without ever feeling a drop fall from the sky. It is a landscape of extremes, where life clings to existence on the edge of possibility, and where silence and emptiness stretch as far as the eye can see. Yet within this apparent lifelessness lies a world of remarkable beauty, scientific importance, and quiet resilience. The Atacama's dryness is legendary. Some weather stations in its central plateau, known as the hyperarid core, have never recorded rainfall since measurements began. In parts of this region, annual precipitation averages less than 1 millimeter, and centuries can pass without significant rain. Even by desert standards, this is extraordinary. By comparison, the Sahara receives about 25 millimeters per year, and the Mojave can see over 100. In the Atacama, the very concept of rain is almost mythical. The soil in many places is so parched and devoid of organic matter that it closely resembles the surface of Mars. Indeed, scientists searching for signs of life on other planets often come here first, using the Atacama as a natural laboratory to test their instruments and hypotheses. The desert's unparalleled dryness is the result of a rare convergence of climatic forces. To the west, the cold Humboldt Current flows northward along the Chilean coast, cooling the air above it and reducing its capacity to hold moisture. This creates a stable layer of cool, dry air that suppresses the formation of clouds and precipitation. To the east, the Andes rise like a colossal wall, blocking moist air masses from the Amazon basin and preventing them from reaching the coast. Meanwhile, the subtropical high-pressure system that dominates the region's skies pushes descending dry air toward the ground, further limiting rainfall. Together, these factors create a near-perfect recipe for aridity, one that has endured for millions of years. The result is a landscape unlike any other on Earth. The Atacama is a place of vast salt flats that shimmer white under the relentless sun, wind-sculpted dunes that shift like frozen waves, and rocky plains where not a blade of grass breaks the surface. Volcanic peaks loom over the horizon, their slopes streaked with mineral colors that hint at the desert's geological richness. In some regions, the soil contains nitrates, borates, and other minerals deposited over eons, making the Atacama one of the most mineral-rich deserts in the world. It is no coincidence that Chile is one of the leading producers of copper and lithium, vital elements for modern technology, much of which is mined from this ancient desert. Yet, despite its harshness, the Atacama is not entirely lifeless. In the few places where water does appear, along river valleys fed by Andean snowmelt or in the rare oases that dot the landscape, life blooms with astonishing vigor. Green reeds line streams, flamingos gather in shallow salt lagoons, and hardy shrubs and cacti cling to rocky slopes. Even in the most barren stretches, microorganisms have adapted to survive in ways that challenge our understanding of life's limits. Scientists have discovered bacteria and archaea living in salty, nutrient-poor soils, enduring intense ultraviolet radiation and desiccation. These organisms are more than just biological curiosities. They offer insights into how life might exist on Mars or other planets with similarly hostile conditions. Humans, too, have long found ways to live in the Atacama, drawn by its scarce but vital resources. Indigenous peoples such as the Atacaminos and Aymara have inhabited the region for thousands of years, settling near water sources and adapting their lifestyles to the desert's rhythms. They cultivated crops like quinoa and maize in irrigated valleys, herded llamas and alpacas in the highlands, and traded with neighboring regions. In the colonial era and beyond, the desert became a source of wealth for its minerals. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, nitrate mining transformed the Atacama into a bustling center of industry, with towns springing up seemingly overnight. Many of those settlements have since been abandoned, their ghostly remains standing as monuments to a bygone era of boom and decline. Today, the Atacama's otherworldly qualities continue to attract explorers, not just miners but scientists, astronomers, and travelers. Its thin, dry air and almost total lack of cloud cover make it one of the best places on Earth for stargazing, and some of the world's most advanced observatories, such as the Atacama Large Millimeter/Submillimeter Array ALMA, are perched on its high plateaus. These facilities peer deep into the cosmos, taking advantage of the desert's clarity to study the birth of stars and galaxies billions of light-years away. Meanwhile, astrobiologists scour the desert's most desolate soils for clues to how life might arise and endure in the harsh conditions of other planets. The Atacama Desert is more than just a place of dryness. It is a place of paradoxes and revelations. It is both barren and full of hidden life, ancient and ever-changing, hostile yet vital to human progress. Its extreme aridity, which once might have seemed a curse, has become a key to understanding not only Earth's climate and ecosystems, but also the broader question of life in the universe. Standing on its salt-crusted plains, where the horizon stretches unbroken beneath a cobalt sky, one cannot help but feel a sense of awe. The Atacama is a reminder that even in the most inhospitable corners of our planet, nature finds ways to endure, and that in its stark silence, the desert still has much to teach us about resilience, adaptation, and the possibilities that lie beyond our world. The Namib Desert in Namibia holds a distinction that sets it apart from all other arid landscapes on Earth. It is the oldest desert in the world. For at least 55 million years, and possibly for as long as 80 million, this stretch of land along the southwest coast of Africa has remained dry. While other deserts have expanded and contracted with shifting climates, the Namib has persisted through vast epochs of geological and atmospheric change, enduring ice ages, continental shifts, and warming periods. Its dunes, plains, and rocky outcrops are the living testimony of a desert that has never ceased to be a desert, making it a unique archive of natural history and a wonder of resilience. Stretching for over 2,000 kilometers along the Atlantic coast and reaching up to 200 kilometers inland in some places, the Namib is not vast compared to the Sahara or the Arabian Desert. Its area is smaller, yet its significance lies not in size but in age. The very word Namib means vast place in the Nama language, and it is easy to see why. The desert's horizons are immense, with towering sand dunes that rise as high as 300 meters, some among the tallest on Earth, their crests and ridges sculpted by winds that never rest. These dunes glow red and orange under the African sun, their colors deepened by the iron oxide in the sand, which itself is ancient, blown inland from the ocean over millions of years. The endurance of the Namib as a desert is due to a combination of geography and climate. The cold Benguela current flows along the Atlantic coast beside it, chilling the air and preventing moisture from rising into the atmosphere. This creates a near-permanent high-pressure system that suppresses rainfall, leaving the desert in a state of aridity that has persisted for tens of millions of years. Instead of rain, the desert receives fog, which drifts inland from the sea in the early mornings and evenings. For many of the Namib's plants and animals, this fog is the primary source of water. In this way, the desert's survival is tied to the ocean currents that bathe its edge, a rare marriage of marine and terrestrial forces shaping one of the most unusual ecosystems on the planet. The age of the Namib has allowed life to adapt in extraordinary ways. The creatures that inhabit it are not only survivors but specialists honed by millions of years of selective pressures. The famous fog-basking beetle, for example, climbs to the tops of dunes in the early morning and lifts its body into the moist air so that water droplets condense on its back, trickling down into its mouth. Plants like the bizarre Welwitschia mirabilis, with its two sprawling leaves that can live for over 1,000 years, draw moisture directly from the fog and groundwater, enduring where almost nothing else can. Oryx antelopes regulate their body temperatures to conserve water, and desert-adapted elephants wander the dry riverbeds, moving across great distances to find food and water. Each of these species is a chapter in the story of how life has coexisted with unbroken aridity for longer than anywhere else on Earth. The Namib is also a desert of striking contrasts. Despite its extreme dryness, rivers like the Kizeb and the Tsacheb carve paths through it, though most of them never reach the sea. Instead, their waters disappear into the sands, leaving behind dry valleys and clay pans. One of the most iconic of these is Deadfly, where centuries-old camel thorn trees, long dead, stand preserved against a backdrop of orange dunes and white salt flats. The scene is surreal, a place where time seems to have stopped, and it speaks to the power of the desert to preserve as much as to destroy. For humans, the Namib has long been a place of both challenge and fascination. Indigenous groups such as the San and the Nama have lived at its edges, drawing sustenance from its meager resources and developing knowledge of its rhythms that outsiders could barely imagine. In more recent centuries, explorers, settlers, and miners have ventured into it, seeking minerals, salt, and diamonds buried beneath its sands. The Namib's diamond fields, some of the richest in the world, reveal that even in such a barren place, the earth hides treasures of immense value. Yet human intrusion has also brought dangers, as fragile ecosystems risk being disturbed in ways that natural forces never did. The persistence of the Namib Desert is more than a geological curiosity. It is a reminder of endurance on a planetary scale. While climates across Earth have shifted dramatically, the Namib has remained a desert, its identity unchanged. This stability offers scientists an unparalleled opportunity to study long-term desert ecosystems and the ways in which life evolves under constant aridity. It also provides a glimpse into ancient Earth, a window into what the world might have looked like in times long before humans appeared. To stand in the Namib is to stand in a place that has not been transformed by forests or seas for tens of millions of years. A place as old as deserts can possibly be. At the same time, the Namib is fragile, like all deserts. Climate change and human activities threaten to alter its delicate balance. While the desert itself will likely remain dry, changes in the Benguela Current or in rainfall patterns could disrupt the ecosystems that have adapted so finely to its conditions. Protecting it is not only a matter of conserving Namibia's heritage, but also of safeguarding one of Earth's oldest living laboratories. The Namib Desert, the oldest desert in the world, is more than a barren expanse of sand. It is a monument to time, a record of Earth's past climates, and a stage on which life has demonstrated its extraordinary ability to adapt and endure. Its dunes and valleys, its fog-fed plants and beetles, its silence and its vastness all tell the story of a desert that has never been anything else. To walk in the Namib is to step into deep time, to feel the weight of millions of years beneath your feet, and to recognize the resilience of both the land and the life that calls it home. High in the Andes of southwest Bolivia lies a place so vast and otherworldly that it challenges the imagination. The Sala de Uyuni, the largest salt desert on Earth, stretches across more than 10,000 square kilometers, creating a landscape unlike any other. From above, it looks like a giant white mirror of the sky. On the ground, it feels like stepping onto another planet. Its immensity is overwhelming, its whiteness dazzling, and its formation and significance tell a story that is as scientific as it is poetic. The Sala de Uyuni is not a desert of sand but of salt, the remains of ancient lakes that once covered this high plateau. Around 40,000 years ago, much of this region was submerged under Lake Minchin, a massive prehistoric body of water. As the climate shifted and the lake dried up, layers of salt were left behind, creating what is today an endless expanse of gleaming white crust. This crust is several meters thick in some places and conceals a rich brine beneath, saturated with minerals, especially lithium. What began as a transformation of water into solid salt has become one of the most remarkable natural wonders of South America. The scale of the Sala de Uyuni is almost beyond comprehension. It is larger than some countries, so flat and expansive that it is often used to calibrate satellites. On a clear day, the horizon seems infinite, with no obstacles to interrupt the view. During the dry season, the desert is a blinding sheet of salt polygons, cracked and sculpted into geometric patterns by the sun. In the rainy season, however, a thin layer of water can cover the salt, transforming the desert into the largest natural mirror in the world. Sky and ground merge seamlessly, creating surreal reflections that erase the line between earth and heavens. Travelers who walk across it feel as though they are suspended in a dreamscape, neither fully grounded nor entirely adrift. Despite its seemingly inhospitable nature, the Sala de Uyuni is alive with significance. It holds one of the world's largest reserves of lithium, a metal essential to modern technology, powering everything from smartphones to electric cars. This has made the desert both a treasure trove and a contested space, as questions of extraction, economy, and environmental stewardship collide. Beneath the silent expanse lies a resource that could shape the future of energy. Yet balancing exploitation with conservation remains a delicate challenge. The desert also plays host to ecosystems that defy expectation. On its fringes lie islands of land, such as Isla Inkawasi, which rise out of the salt flat like isolated worlds. Covered with giant cacti and populated by birds, these islands provide refuge in an otherwise barren landscape. During certain times of the year, flamingos gather in the shallow waters at the edges of the Sahara, their pink bodies striking against the stark whiteness. They come to breed and feed on microscopic algae, finding sustenance in a place that seems devoid of life. In this way, the Sahara reminds us that even the harshest environments harbor life, adapted to extremes. The cultural presence of the Sahara de Uyuni is just as profound as its physical one. For the people of Bolivia, it is not only a source of salt, which has been harvested for centuries, but also a space of meaning and identity. Local communities have lived alongside this desert for generations, building livelihoods around its resources and incorporating it into their traditions. Travelers from around the world are drawn to its surreal beauty, but for those who call the region home, it is both a landscape of sustenance and a place of belonging. The Sahara also carries symbolic weight. It embodies transformation. What was once a vast lake is now a sea of salt, yet it continues to shift between dry crust and reflective mirror with the seasons. It embodies duality, being both barren and full of promise, both silent and powerful. And it embodies the tension between nature's grandeur and humanity's ambitions. In its vastness, it humbles. In its resources, it entices. In its beauty, it inspires awe. Traveling across the Sahara de Uyuni is unlike crossing any other desert. Vehicles glide over the endless white plain, guided by GPS rather than landmarks, since the flatness and uniformity can disorient even the experienced. At night, the stars above are mirrored in the salt below, creating the illusion of walking through a universe doubled upon itself. Photographs from the Sahara often seem unreal, as though the images have been altered, yet they are simply glimpses of how the world appears in this extraordinary place. The Sahara de Uyuni is the largest salt desert in the world, but it is more than a record holder. It is a reminder of the Earth's power to create landscapes that challenge the boundaries of perception. It is a geological history written in salt, a reflection of the sky on the ground, a storehouse of minerals that might shape the future, and a sanctuary for life in unexpected forms. To stand upon it is to feel the enormity of both nature's past and humanity's possibilities, to be dwarfed by its immensity and yet to marvel at the fragile beauty it offers. The Sahara is not merely a desert. It is a mirror of time, of space, and of ourselves. It is hard to imagine, gazing upon the endless expanse of golden sand stretching beneath the scorching sun, that the Sahara Desert was once alive with movement, conversation, and commerce. Today it appears as a vast, inhospitable sea of dunes, a place where silence reigns and life clings to the margins. Yet for centuries, this formidable landscape was crisscrossed by busy trade routes, pulsing with the footsteps of caravans and the ambitions of merchants. The Sahara was not merely an obstacle to be feared. It was a highway that connected civilizations, a bridge across which goods, ideas, and cultures flowed. Long before the rise of modern transportation, the desert was the heart of a thriving network that linked sub-Saharan Africa with the Mediterranean world and beyond. The key to this transformation was the camel, introduced to North Africa around the 3rd century CE. Adapted to the desert's extremes, camels could travel for days without water and carry heavy loads over immense distances. Their arrival revolutionized desert travel, making possible what had once been nearly unthinkable: regular, organized movement across the Sahara. With the camel as their companion, merchants began to map out and follow ancient paths, routes that would become the arteries of trans-Saharan trade. At the height of this trade network, from roughly the 8th to the 16th centuries, the Sahara was anything but empty. Thousands of traders, travelers, and pilgrims traversed its sands in caravans that sometimes stretched for miles. They carried salt from the mines of Tagaza and Tadeni, a commodity so vital it was often worth its weight in gold. They brought gold itself from the rich kingdoms of West Africa, such as Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, whose wealth astonished medieval chroniclers. From the north came fine textiles, glassware, horses, and books. From the south flowed ivory, kola nuts, ostrich feathers, and enslaved people. The desert was not a barrier but a conduit, its routes binding together worlds as distant as the forest kingdoms of West Africa and the bustling ports of the Mediterranean. Along these routes, cities rose like oases of human endeavor, their fortunes tied to the rhythms of the desert trade. Timbuktu, Gao, and Walata flourished in the south, their streets filled with scholars and traders. In the north, cities like Sijilmassa and Gatams became vital staging points, where caravans were organized and goods exchanged. These were cosmopolitan places, where Berber, Arab, and African merchants mingled, where languages blended, and where the scent of distant lands clung to the air. The trade routes were not only economic lifelines, they were cultural arteries through which ideas, technologies, and religions flowed. The spread of Islam across North and West Africa was deeply entwined with this commerce. Traders did not carry only salt and gold. They brought with them beliefs, practices, and books. Scholars traveled the same routes as merchants, and the desert became a corridor of intellectual as well as material exchange. Timbuktu, nourished by the wealth of trans-Saharan trade, emerged as a celebrated center of learning, its libraries filled with manuscripts that preserved centuries of knowledge. The great empires of West Africa, too, owed much of their power and prestige to the wealth that flowed through the desert highways. Kings like Mansa Musa of Mali, whose legendary pilgrimage to Mecca in the 14th century displayed his kingdom's immense riches, ruled states whose prosperity was built on the commerce that crossed the sands. Travel across the Sahara was arduous and dangerous. Caravans faced not only the punishing heat and scarcity of water, but also the threat of bandits and sudden sandstorms that could bury entire expeditions. Routes were carefully chosen to pass from oasis to oasis, each one a precious lifeline in the vast emptiness. These journeys could take weeks or even months, and the bond between merchants and their camels was one forged in shared endurance. Yet despite the hardships, the rewards were great, and the rhythm of caravans across the desert became as predictable as the changing of the seasons. The decline of these great desert highways came slowly but decisively. By the late 15th century, European explorers had begun charting sea routes to West Africa and beyond. The new maritime trade networks could carry far greater quantities of goods more quickly and at lower cost than even the largest camel caravans. Ports like Lisbon and Seville supplanted the desert cities as centers of commerce, and the once bustling routes across the Sahara fell silent. Cities that had thrived on the trade, like Sijilmassa and Walata, dwindled into obscurity. The desert reclaimed its ancient stillness. Yet the echoes of that vibrant past remain. The ruins of caravanserais lie half buried in the sand, silent witnesses to the thousands of travelers who once rested there. Ancient manuscripts in Timbuktu's libraries preserve the intellectual legacy born of that age of exchange. Even today, in some remote regions, small camel caravans still trace parts of the old routes, carrying salt and goods much as their ancestors did centuries ago. The Sahara, for all its apparent emptiness, holds the memory of a time when it was a place of connection rather than separation, a vast and shifting road on which the world's riches and ideas flowed. To look upon the Sahara only as a barrier is to misunderstand its history. Beneath its austere surface lies the story of a desert that was once alive with purpose and possibility, a place where the determination of people and the resilience of camels transformed a forbidding wilderness into one of the world's greatest trade highways. The sands that now seem so empty were once heavy with footsteps and ambition, carrying the weight of civilizations across the heart of a continent. In the heart of the world's deserts, where rain is scarce and clouds are rare visitors, the skies open up in a way that is unlike anywhere else on Earth. Day and night, they stretch vast and unobstructed, a boundless dome of light and color that feels close enough to touch. The very conditions that make deserts harsh and unforgiving, extreme dryness, sparse vegetation, and minimal weather activity, also make them home to some of the clearest, purest skies on the planet. Here, the air is so clean and the atmosphere so stable that the heavens reveal themselves in all their brilliance, offering a window into the cosmos and a stage for the drama of sunlight and starlight alike. The reason for these extraordinary skies begins with the desert's defining characteristic: aridity. Deserts receive less than 250 millimeters of rain a year, and in some, like the Atacama in Chile, decades can pass without a single drop. With so little moisture in the air, clouds struggle to form. Water vapor, which condenses into clouds and scatters sunlight, is largely absent. As a result, the skies remain crystal clear for most of the year, uninterrupted by the shifting shapes and shadows that dominate more temperate regions. The absence of humidity also means less scattering of light by tiny droplets, allowing sunlight to reach the surface in its purest form and starlight to pierce through the darkness unimpeded. Dust, too, plays a surprisingly small role in many deserts. While sandstorms and dust devils do occur, especially in the Sahara or Arabian deserts, they are usually brief and localized. The rest of the time, the air is remarkably clean, free from the pollution and particulate matter that cloud the skies over cities and forests. This clarity allows for sharp, undistorted views of the heavens, where stars shine with a brilliance that seems almost unreal. Astronomers seek out such skies, building their most powerful telescopes in remote desert regions like the Atacama Plateau, where more than 300 nights a year are cloud-free and the atmosphere is as transparent as glass. The clarity of desert skies is not only a feature of the night but also of the day. With little moisture or vegetation to scatter sunlight, the daytime sky over a desert often appears a deeper, richer blue than in wetter climates. Sunrises and sunsets here unfold with breathtaking intensity, their colors unfurling across the horizon in vivid streaks of red, orange, and gold. As the sun climbs higher, the light is almost blinding in its purity, casting sharp, well-defined shadows and illuminating every detail of the land. The starkness of the landscape, bare rock, sand, and salt flats, enhances this effect, reflecting the light with dazzling clarity and making the desert seem like a world bathed in raw, unfiltered sunlight. When night falls, the transformation is profound. With no humidity to diffuse the starlight and little light pollution to compete with it, the desert sky becomes a vast tapestry of stars. The Milky Way stretches across it in luminous detail, and even faint celestial objects become visible to the naked eye. In many deserts, the air is also exceptionally stable, meaning it is not churned by rapid changes in temperature or turbulent weather. This stability reduces the twinkling effect caused by atmospheric distortion and provides astronomers with steady, undisturbed views of the heavens. It is no coincidence that some of humanity's greatest astronomical discoveries have been made beneath desert skies, where the universe reveals itself with unmatched clarity. The Atacama Desert is a prime example of how these conditions come together. Perched high in the Chilean Andes, it is one of the driest places on Earth, with humidity levels close to zero and more than 300 clear nights a year. Its thin, clean air and high altitude reduce the amount of atmosphere that light must travel through, making it ideal for studying distant galaxies and faint cosmic phenomena. Major observatories like ALMA and the Very Large Telescope were built here precisely because the skies are so pristine. But the Atacama is not alone. Deserts from Namibia's Namib to the American Southwest's Mojave offer similarly spectacular conditions, attracting astronomers, photographers, and stargazers alike. The clarity of desert skies has also shaped human culture and imagination for millennia. For ancient peoples living in these regions, the heavens were not distant or abstract but a constant, vivid presence. Nomads navigating vast, featureless landscapes learned to read the stars like maps, guiding their journeys by constellations that were always visible. Myths and stories were woven around the movements of planets and the appearance of comets, inspired by the nightly spectacle overhead. Even today, travelers speak of the profound sense of wonder that comes from lying beneath a desert sky, surrounded by silence and infinity. Beyond their beauty, clear desert skies play a role in science and technology far beyond astronomy. Satellite calibration, solar energy research, and atmospheric studies all benefit from the stable, transparent conditions deserts provide. They serve as natural laboratories for understanding how light interacts with Earth's atmosphere and how it might behave on other planets. In many ways, the desert sky is both a window into our universe and a mirror reflecting the delicate balance of our own planet's climate and atmosphere. To stand beneath a desert sky is to experience the world stripped to its essentials. There is nothing to hide the vastness of space or to dull the brilliance of sunlight. It is a place where the boundary between Earth and cosmos feels thin, where the heavens press close and reveal themselves without disguise. This clarity is born of hardship, the dryness, the heat, the emptiness, but it transforms the desert into one of the most breathtaking theaters of light and space on Earth. In a world where city lights and pollution increasingly obscure the night sky, the deserts remain sanctuaries of celestial wonder. They remind us of the universe's immensity and our small but curious place within it. And whether bathed in the pure blaze of midday sun or beneath a canopy of 1,000,000 stars, their skies offer something rare and precious. A view of the world and the cosmos beyond, as they truly are, clear, vast, and infinite. In deserts, where heat rules the day and the horizon seems endless, the eye often plays tricks. Travelers have long spoken of shimmering lakes appearing in the distance, only to vanish as they approach, or of shapes that seemed like distant towns, mountains, or trees but dissolved into nothingness. These illusions are not hallucinations in the mind but real effects of light, created by the intense heat waves that rise from the desert floor. Known as mirages, they are a natural consequence of physics, a bending of light caused by extreme differences in air temperature, and they are among the most fascinating features of desert landscapes. At the heart of the phenomenon lies the way air behaves under heat. In deserts, the ground absorbs the sun's energy all day long, reaching searing temperatures. This heat transfers into the layer of air closest to the surface, making it much hotter and less dense than the air above. Light traveling from the sky passes through these layers of air, and because light changes direction when it moves between layers of different density, a process called refraction, it bends. When the gradient of temperature is steep enough, light rays that would normally travel in a straight line are curved upward, creating the illusion that the sky itself is reflected on the ground. To the human eye, this looks like water, a shimmering pool lying just ahead. The illusion of water is especially powerful because of the way our brains interpret reflected light. On hot desert plains, the curved rays of light carry images of the blue sky down to our eyes, and our minds instinctively translate that as water, since we are accustomed to seeing reflections on lakes, rivers, or puddles. What the traveler perceives as a glittering lake in the distance is nothing more than refracted light from the sky. As they approach, the illusion recedes, always just out of reach, a moving phantom created by physics. This explains why accounts of parched wanderers chasing mirages through deserts are so common. The sight is compelling enough to fool even the most rational observer. But not all desert mirages are simple illusions of water. Sometimes the bending of light can create images of distant objects, shifting them upward, stretching them, or making them appear where they are not. A caravan of camels miles away may seem to float above the horizon, distorted and shimmering. Mountains far in the distance may appear elongated, like towers rising impossibly high. These are known as superior mirages, formed when colder, denser air lies beneath a layer of warmer air, a reversal of the usual desert condition. In both cases, whether inferior mirages of water or superior mirages of floating objects, the desert becomes a stage where reality and illusion intertwine. The psychological impact of these illusions cannot be understated. In the vast emptiness of deserts, where landmarks are few and distances are deceptive, mirages add another layer of disorientation. A thirsty traveler might press on toward what looks like relief, only to find more sand. Even experienced desert dwellers must learn to recognize mirages and avoid being deceived by them. For centuries, stories of shimmering oases or phantom cities on the horizon have been woven into desert folklore, blurring the line between natural phenomenon and legend. Entire myths have sprung from these visions, where ghostly towns or forbidden lands appear in the heat haze, luring travelers into the unknown. Mirages are not limited to deserts, though deserts provide the most dramatic examples. Roads on hot summer days often display the same effect, with patches of sky appearing like puddles of water on the asphalt. The principle is identical. Hot surfaces create layers of air with varying density, bending light to produce illusions. Yet in deserts, the scale is grander, the heat more intense, and the emptiness of the surroundings amplifies the deception. There, with little else to distract the eye, the illusions dominate the horizon, becoming both beautiful and unsettling. What makes mirages especially intriguing is that they remind us of the limitations of perception. The human eye is a powerful instrument, but it depends entirely on light, and light itself is subject to the conditions through which it travels. In deserts, the constant shimmer of heat waves distorts not just what we see but also what we believe we see. A flat expanse may ripple as if made of water, a distant dune may blur and shift, a cluster of rocks may appear to float. These distortions reveal a truth. Our sense of reality is shaped by the environment, and under certain conditions, reality itself can bend. For animals that live in deserts, the shimmering illusions play a different role. Many predators and prey have sharper senses attuned to smell, sound, or vibration, relying less on vision than humans do. Yet the heat haze still changes how they are seen, making camouflage even more effective or confusing the gaze of an approaching predator. The very physics that creates illusions for humans also adds to the complexity of survival for desert creatures. There is a strange beauty in the way deserts create mirages. They are not simply tricks to torment the thirsty but natural expressions of a landscape dominated by extremes. In them, we glimpse both the power of the sun and the fragility of human perception. They are fleeting artworks of light and air, shimmering between reality and imagination, never fully attainable. For the desert traveler, they serve as both a warning and a wonder, a reminder to trust more than the eyes and a testament to the strange artistry of nature. To witness a mirage in a desert is to stand at the edge of reality itself. The illusion of water or distant objects speaks not only of the harshness of the land but also of the ingenuity of the earth in shaping experiences that are both deceiving and profound. In the stillness of the desert heat, where the air itself seems to dance, the world becomes fluid, and the line between truth and illusion blurs, leaving the traveler humbled by the mysteries of light. Across the vast, sun-scorched expanses of the world's deserts, life seems almost impossible. Blistering days, frigid nights, and an unforgiving scarcity of water define these landscapes. And yet, for thousands of years, people have not only survived but thrived in them. Among the most remarkable are the Bedouins of the Arabian deserts and the San of southern Africa's Kalahari. Their deep knowledge of the land, passed down through generations, has allowed them to navigate some of the harshest environments on Earth. What might seem to outsiders as barren and deadly is, to them, a home rich with hidden resources and subtle signs of life. The Bedouins, whose name means desert dwellers in Arabic, have roamed the deserts of the Middle East and North Africa for centuries, moving with the seasons and the needs of their herds. They developed a profound understanding of the desert's rhythms and secrets, especially when it came to finding water, the most precious resource of all. In a landscape where rain is rare and rivers almost non-existent, they learned to read the signs written into the land itself. The presence of certain plants, such as tamarisk or acacia, hinted at underground moisture. A cluster of insects, the flight patterns of birds at dawn, or even the behavior of grazing animals could signal the proximity of water. Bedouins would dig shallow wells in dry riverbeds, known as wadis, where water often lingers beneath the surface long after the rains have vanished. They also relied on ancient wells, many of them centuries old, scattered along traditional migration routes. These wells were not simply holes in the ground but carefully maintained lifelines shared by tribes and travelers. Oral tradition carried the memory of their locations across generations, with elders teaching the young how to find them and how to ration water carefully once it was drawn. For the Bedouins, water was never wasted. Every drop was measured, valued, and shared according to custom and need. Food, too, required intimate knowledge of the desert's offerings. The Bedouins raised camels, goats, and sheep, animals well adapted to the desert's extremes. Camels could go for days without water and provided milk, meat, and transport. Dates from hardy palm trees were another staple, as were grains carried with them or traded from settled communities. Wild plants and herbs gathered after rare rains supplemented their diet, and their ability to locate edible roots or fruits in seemingly barren soil often meant the difference between hunger and sustenance. Hunting, though limited, added variety. Hares, gazelles, and birds were caught with skill, guided by knowledge of animal tracks and behavior honed over generations. On the other side of the continent, in the Kalahari Desert, the Sand people, often referred to as Bushmen, developed an entirely different but equally sophisticated set of survival strategies. Unlike the Bedouins, the Sand were traditionally hunter-gatherers, moving in small bands across the arid savanna and desert scrublands. Their understanding of the environment was extraordinary, based on close observation and centuries of accumulated wisdom. They knew how to find water in places that appeared utterly dry. One of their most ingenious methods involved water-bearing plants like the tsama melon and various species of tubers and roots, which store moisture underground. By digging carefully and slicing these roots, they could extract enough water to sustain themselves during long, dry periods. The Sand also collected rainwater that pooled in the hollows of rocks after infrequent storms, storing it in ostrich eggshells sealed with grass. These eggshell canteens, buried beneath the sand, could preserve water for weeks, a simple but brilliant form of natural storage. Like the Bedouins, they read subtle signs in the land and sky. The flight of doves might lead them to a hidden waterhole, and the scent of damp earth after a distant rain could draw them toward a new source. Their keen awareness extended beyond water to food as well. The Sand's knowledge of edible plants was encyclopedic. They identified hundreds of species, knowing which berries, nuts, and roots could be eaten raw, which needed preparation, and which were poisonous. They hunted with remarkable skill, using bows tipped with poison extracted from beetle larvae, and followed game over long distances by reading the faintest tracks in the sand. This method, known as persistence hunting, required deep knowledge of animal behavior and extraordinary stamina, allowing them to bring down antelope and other large prey even in extreme heat. Nothing was wasted. Meat was shared, hides were used for clothing and shelter, and bones were fashioned into tools. What unites the Bedouins and the Sand, despite the differences in their environments and ways of life, is the depth of their relationship with the land. Their survival was never a matter of chance. It was the result of generations of observation, adaptation, and respect. They learned to live not against the desert but with it, reading its moods, anticipating its challenges, and drawing sustenance from its hidden gifts. Their knowledge was practical, born of necessity, but it was also cultural and spiritual. The desert shaped their stories, their traditions, and their understanding of the world. In the modern age, many of these ancient practices are fading as younger generations move to cities and rely on modern technologies. Yet the wisdom of the Bedouins and the Sand remains deeply relevant. In a world facing climate change and water scarcity, their ways of finding, preserving, and sharing resources hold lessons about resilience, sustainability, and harmony with nature. The deserts they call home are not barren wastelands but living landscapes, full of signs and resources for those who know how to look. The story of the Bedouins and the Sand is a reminder that survival is not about conquering nature but understanding it. Through patience, observation, and ingenuity, they transformed some of the harshest places on Earth into habitable worlds. Their lives show that even in the most unforgiving environments, humanity's greatest strength has always been its capacity to learn from the land and adapt to its rhythms.